Okay. Well, I think we can get started. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for waiting around. It's going to be worth it, I promise. This is soundtrack composition in the modern age of indie games. This is Elizabeth Lane up in the corner. She's going to be giving you a live demonstration of music composition. You can find her at Lizard Eats Flies on Twitter, or you can just go to elizabethlane.com and check out all the cool stuff she does. With that said, I'm going to shut up and give you the floor.
All right. Everyone can hear me? Hopefully we have a thumbs up in chat or I don't know, wave your tentacles or something. Cool. Hi. So I'm Elizabeth Lane. I apologize if I look a little disheveled. I was just at a show outside at a festival, so playing on stage. So I'm sweating and makeup's running and all that. Anyway, so I am a soundtrack composer slash musician slash music producer slash game nerd. I've been composing for about 12 years, but I've only sort of recently started getting into doing a lot of soundtrack stuff, starting with some short films. I did a short horror film that premiered in Hollywood, and then the next year got invited to last October, got invited to Screamfest in Hollywood, which was kind of a big deal, a nice little film festival for horror films. I've done a lot of work for various Twitch streamers, and I'm doing some video game composition at the moment. And it's really cool, and what's really, really neat about where we're at, and this is like obviously an indie game talk, one of the things that's really cool is how accessible a lot of the tools for game making have become. That you all know this, like things with like Unity and things like that. But one of the things that often gets kind of forgotten about, or is kind of a little bit more of a black box, because we know things like this cool sprite art, pixel art, there's 3D tools, but one of the things that gets kind of like, this black art of soundtrack composition. And so one of the things I kind of want to do today is to kind of demystify how we might approach soundtrack composition. And I'm going to focus on, obviously there's many, many different styles of music, but I'm going to focus on orchestral, kind of an orchestral hybrid composition, because it seems to be the one that's most like, how can we get that? And obviously, music and art is so important to your games. It can, a lot of people I've seen leave it to kind of the last minute and then wonder where they can get stuff or where they can get royalty-free music and wonder if they can afford a composer and custom music on a budget. And I'm here to tell you, yes, you can. There's a lot of things that you can do that can work within smaller budgets all the way up to, if you have budgets to hire full orchestras and things like that, if that's what you want. So yeah, and of course, like having custom music for your game is going to bring it to that next level, because my job as a composer is to kind of heighten everybody's senses, heighten the experience, if you will. If it's supposed to be an emotional scene or cutscene or something like that, then it's my job to heighten that emotion. If it's supposed to give a frantic pacing, it's my job as a composer to give that feel to the player to kind of make that pace feel more. You can take a game that has no, time, like timer on it, but you can make it feel with the music, you can make it feel frantic and pressing and lead the player into that state of like almost anxiousness. You can relax the pace. And these are all things that we can do, and there's a lot of really cool tools that we can use as composers to work with the game designer to kind of be able to try some things very quickly, to rapidly prototype, to take themes and drastically change a theme into a completely different feel. So that's kind of what I want to show, is like all right, how do I do this? What does the software look like? How does one compose with virtual orchestras? What's going on under the hood? And just to kind of give an example, and I'm basically doing this completely live. I've only barely prepared a little bit of a riff like 15 minutes ago because it's more fun to, edge of my seat. And then I can kind of explain, and then at the end I'll sort of play you a piece I've done that's and maybe I can send the hosts so they can give better audio, but I can send you a link and we can play a piece that I wrote that's kind of been finished. So that's my thing. I can answer questions too about all this stuff. So what you're seeing right now, aside from me in a little corner, is software called Cubase. There's many different pieces of software, but this one is mine. I like Cubase because has some really nice composer tools, and it can record audio. It can mix effects, everything you can want from a sort of digital audio workstation. Now, I have a template loaded here. This is sort of my basic orchestral template. And it's a pretty small one compared to what a lot of composers use, but it sort of is, when I start a piece, when someone says, I want something in the sort of orchestral vibe, this is what I load up. And let me bring up Task Manager because it's fun to show you. So I'm using just over 20 gigs of memory right now. So it does what I do requires a significant machine, but 20 gigs of memory. If I push it and have everything enabled, it's going to be pushing 30 gigs probably. So virtual instruments, I'm going to kind of go through just basics of what a virtual instrument is. I have a control surface up here, so if you see me pushing buttons over here, it's just using my shortcuts. So virtual instruments are like, 20 gigs. So I'm bringing up what's called Kontakt. Kontakt is a sampler and sample library player, if you will. This lets you load in virtual instruments and it has a scripting language under the covers that lets you, how do I want to say it? The scripting language can tell the instruments how to play. So for example, I have a cello here. Now, this cello section so that's this cello that I'm using, they actually recorded a group of cellists. Yeah, samples are big. So they actually record a group of cello players in the same soundstage that they recorded like real live orchestras for the likes of Raiders of the Lost Ark and things like that. So a really nice studio. And they sit down a group of cello players who are professionals, and they say, okay, play a C and play it softly. And then they'll play a C. And then like, okay, play a D and play that softly. And so on and so forth. They have them play every single note. And then they say, okay, we're going to play those same notes, but a little louder. And then, okay, we're going to play those at full volume. And they're going to do them in short notes, slightly longer notes, longer still, and then legato, which is a sustained. So they record them at what we call different articulations, which means the quality of the note being played. You also have things like pizzicato, which is like a plucked note. Con legno, which is where you hit the thing, the strings with the violin bow, like the wood of it. So again, they're recording these, and I'm just looking at a cello part. But they're recording these at every single note, at different dynamics, so different volume levels, different techniques, and even for the legato, because if you're playing slow and you transition from one note to another, that transition is actually important. So they actually record each of the transitions between notes. So it's got a boo-woo. So you can imagine that, and this, again, this is just for the cello. And then they do this for the violin section. And then they do this for the flutes and the clarinets and brass. And it's an immense amount of data. So this is why I said it takes up like 20 gigs, is because you literally have all these tiny little samples, note by note, articulation by articulation, all built up. And what Kontakt does, and there are other ones out there, but what Kontakt does, and the scripting behind a lot of these, is they give you a way to play them and access them. As a composer, they try to make it so that when I play, notes like this, it's doing all the math and the algorithms under the covers to figure out, oh crap, what did she play? What notes do I need to do? How hard did she hit the key? What volume are we at? And to do all the blending and everything to make this sound nice. So this is sort of the basic toolkit that we as composers have. And there are many different sample libraries. I'm using one from Cinesamples, which I really like their stuff. I have their whole orchestral suite, which sounds really good together. And so that's kind of what I do is like I have all these things loaded in, and my template here, each one of these kind of horizontal lines is a different, I'm not sure if you can read it, but the blue are all different woodwinds. And we have bassoon, bass clarinet, etc. The purple are all different strings. Orange, the orangey yellow is brass. I have percussion, different tonal percussion down here, and percussion. So everything for me is color-coded. Now, of course, I'm not going to use everything in every song. I might just be using strings and brass, but I still load up my template because for me, speed is key. I have to be able to access my instruments very quickly. If I have to go through a bunch of menus to load in an instrument and be like, oh, do I want flute or not? And then it's like, I want to be able to just try things quickly. And so being able to have all this stuff at my fingertips, which is why, I've invested in so the machine and in those sample libraries to be able to do this. And samplers are not just for, to be clear, it's not just for like orchestral or sort of real instruments. There's a lot of really interesting hybrid and synth style instruments that have gone through samplers. And percussion, like here's like a big drum kit. Like so nice and big percussion. So there's a lot of fun stuff here. So of course, the trick becomes, as a composer, I have to learn how to use all these samples and all the tools available to make the best sounding thing I can. The good news is it's a lot cheaper than hiring a full orchestra. And I could talk a little bit, too, about a lot of people, even if you are going to be going to a full orchestra, they will start using sort of virtual instruments as a way to compose and to get a mock-up. So you can get a really close to what you want, and then they would actually translate it to sheet music and record it as a full orchestra if you have the budget for it. So it's kind of a really cool, it's a really useful tool for getting really good sounding things in and of itself, but it's also a good tool for kind of the springboard into the more advanced, the higher budgets. So yeah. So that's that. So I'm going to just start by kind of recording. You'll hear a beeping sound. That's my metronome. I'll be turning that on and off with the click track. And I'm going to start with my French horns here. And I'm just going to record a little riff. And like I said, I'm doing this live. This is not planned. So I'll basically show you this is actually how I work. So let's just start recording and see what happens. Come on. Record for me. Thank you. Get my click track. Thank you. Some things are not hooked up quite right. Okay, so that's my melody we're going to go with. So basically my composition style, and people who've seen me compose before know that my style is basically like slam something in and then play with it later. So I'm going to trim off the beginning of it. So anytime you see like this colored bar, so time moves from left to right, and this colored bar means I've recorded something in this part. This, when I double click it and go into this view, you see this is what we call a piano roll. This is essentially this is sheet music. This is also MIDI. That's the cool part is I didn't mention this before, but these virtual instruments all work on MIDI. And many of you know MIDI. Many of you probably are horrified when I talk about MIDI because you think bleepy, bloopy, crappy, Sound Blaster, 16-bit sounds. Or, Casio keyboard, plinka plinka. Yeah, it reminds you of most digital audio workstations have some sort of a piano roll type stuff. It's kind of a way, again, time moves left to right. You can see it's like this side here. If you can, hopefully you can see my cursor. Is like a piano turned on its side. So notes, higher notes are up. It's just a grid, right? Higher notes are higher on the page. Lower notes are lower on the page. Time moves left to right. This stuff down here, this kind of gray bar down here, this is sort of my volume throughout, so I can make things louder and softer. And then down here, I have it on, these are my articulations I can play with. So if I want those like ba 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 ba, maybe I want those to be a little bit more pronounced. So I'm going to give it what's called marcato, and so you can hear the different articulation. So then basically I slammed it in there, and now I'm just kind of adjusting it and kind of programming. And maybe I want it to sustain there on. So, and then I'm going to go to like what's called staccato. So I'm literally changing note by note or phrase by phrase the articulation. You know how I said I could change between short notes, plucked notes, longer notes. I'm literally down here, what I'm doing is fixing that for every single note. So there's a lot of tedious stuff in here, but it's not too bad. Once you learn all the keyboard shortcuts, it's not bad. Maybe I'll change this to marcato instead. And I'm shortening up the notes to give it a little bit of space between them. Oops. Sometimes I hit keys and my cursor goes weird. So I'm not going to do all of it because I don't want to run out of time. But I'll do the end a little bit just to give it a little something. So again, this is in French horns. Now I've done a lot of stuff setting up this template, so I have everything mapped. I have a lot of custom mapping done on this template, which allows me to do things like this. So let me figure out where this phrase ends. Maybe we'll hold it out until the final measure here. So yeah, I can go in and just adjust the volume and taper it off. That looks good. So again, my goal right now is to work quickly to get something that I like the sound of down. something down first because I can play with it later. The blank page for me personally is killer. I do not do well with blank pages. So my goal whenever I start is to slam something down that is reasonably good. And again, it kind of like painting. I want to block in the colors first, and then I can go and add detail and detail. So if I were composing without you guys watching, I probably would leave it here. I wouldn't spend too much time on all this articulation crap, because I can fix that later. It sounds, as long as it sounds good enough, I can fix it later. But I need to thicken this up and do some stuff. So I want to hear what this sounds like on, I don't know, let me think. Let's do a flute. Is that alto flute? Yeah. So basically, because I have all this custom mapping, I'm able to just copy and paste the line up into the alto flute. Now we have to be careful about putting things in the correct range of the instrument, so I can move things up or down an octave. I'm going to move this whole thing up an octave I can just use Shift up arrow. So it's going to be the same notes, just higher. So let's hear what it sounds like in flute. So when I talk about being able to work quickly and work on different moods and themes and being able to work with this sort of rapid cycle with game developers, this is the kind of stuff that I like to be able to do. Is I can take the exact same melody and with very little modification copy and paste it into a completely different instrument. And it allows me to get a very, very different feel. So if you want something, right, like horns have a much more militaristic, a more regal feel. The flute is much softer. It gives it much more of that kind of a tender vibe. So these are all things that we can play with, and is a really cool way of crafting sort of the. I like to play around with things in different instrumentations and get a sense of the sort of emotional vibe, if you will, that I get from each instrument with that given melody or harmony. Because that allows me to, instead of thinking about it like, okay, it's flute, it's clarinet, it's oboe, it's trumpet, I can think about it in terms of, okay, do I want this to be rising and action-y? Do I want this to be tender? I can think of it in terms of emotional impact, which is essentially, as a composer for game music, we're not supposed to be the focus necessarily, unless it's like DDR or Rock Band or something like that, where it's clearly a music game. But most of the time, we're just there to heighten the emotions of the scene, or the gameplay, or whatever the setting is in that particular scene, if you will. So I like to then be able to, as quickly as I can, start thinking in terms of emotional impact of what I'm writing, because that allows me to communicate with not only obviously the idea is to communicate that emotion with the the player of the game, but also to communicate that it's easier to communicate with people who are non-musicians. Like a lot of times, right, if you're not a musician, like I don't know if I want a flute or an oboe, but if I can say, like, do you want it to be more tender? Do you want it to be more militaristic? We can start to talk in terms of feel with the game designer, and then kind of come together and converge on what is right for the game. Also, the nice thing is, because I'm doing everything in MIDI and like this, I can actually change the tempo at will. So I'm at 98 BPM right now, but say I want to like boost this up to a lot faster. So basically, I just put it at 130. Um, so yeah, so it gives me, again, flexibility is the key, which is great because again, I can use the same theme and maybe in a different scene we put it in a different instrument, speed it up, and now we've got an entirely new feel, but it's a callback. So we can maybe theme, like if it's an RPG, like especially like the sort of JRPG style, maybe we give a boss, like the villain a theme, and so we can bring that back in different, different callbacks. I know I watched, if any of you were here for Dean's talk on quest design, there's some brilliant stuff in there, and a lot of the stuff he talks about and how he thinks about bringing quests around and how they fill in the story, and a lot of the stuff he talked about with sort of Final Fantasy VI is, in story writing, I think about music in a very similar way. I want my music to tell a story or enhance the story, and a lot of times having these themes that can make callback. I mean, go listen to John Williams and the Star Wars themes and for a master class in how that works, because Darth Vader's scene, theme, the Imperial March, you hear it slowed down and in lighter instruments during some of the tender moments with Luke, and that tells you something. And again, this is how I can do it in a very quick way and essentially rapidly prototyping music is kind of what I do. All right, we don't have a lot of time. I'm going to try to get some chords down for this stuff here. And I do want to have some time for questions. So I'm just essentially painting in a string part. I'm going to open both the strings and the God, what am I talking about? Horn part at the same time. So I can actually use one. The orange here is going to be the horn, and I can actually just pencil in notes now instead of playing them if I want to. So I am going to do that. I'm just going to pencil in some basic chords since we don't have a lot of time. And here's my strings. Nice. So I'm going to give it just a little bit of dynamics just so it puts it in the right thing. Now I can just duplicate this and adjust. What do I want to do? Let's go up to a C chord. These are really low. I'm going to move this up. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm just taking, and again, slamming in basic chords, and because I can always adjust later. Let me think here. I'm going to do a D minor because that feels right. I've got a D there. D, A, F. So I need to turn my strings down, so I'm just going to grab my mixing board and turn the strings down a little bit. And also do that just by selecting them and adjusting the volume here. What do I got? Just paste, see what happens. All right, let's see. Now what am I doing? So it's a D. So yeah. So again, it's a little tedious, but I'm almost done. What happens if I just play this? Let's hear it. That's a fun chord. That's a one I like. I'm using a couple of weird chords, but that's okay. Actually, it's D, what is it? B, D, F. I don't know, we'll spread out the chord. I like chords that get spread out. I tend to like do things like this, where I actually tend to make... So essentially I can move things around in different octaves. Who's snacking on mic? I don't hear anyone snacking, but it could be me. I'm basically opening up my chords. Let's see. Whoa, what just happened? Ah, I broke everything. Okay. Undo is your friend. And then we'll end it on a nice G chord, because G chords are our friend. There. Ha! We're burping on OBS. Awesome. All right, so this might be how I might start to orchestrate and harmonize it. I'm also going to do a little trick I like to call where I copy the bass line here, and I'm going to go open up my string. So I was using, all of this was done on what's called an ensemble patch. So in this, essentially this patch, it maps the entire orchestra across the keyboard. So you have like, if I'm playing low notes, you have the double basses, right? As I move up, we start to move into cello, and then violas, and then violins are up here. So it's a really good place for just blocking out things like chords and stuff like that. It's a really, yeah. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to duplicate this down into the bass. But if I want to split the instruments out, I have them all individual. Like for bass, I like to put that out because sometimes the bass I might want doing different things. So the last chord is a little bit dissonant. I like dissonance, so I'm going to leave it because I'm the composer and screw you. No, but dissonance is fun. Again, it might not be right for every song or whatever. Dissonance, I mean, when you kind of have those clashing notes, it just sound a little bit ooh together. But I resolved them. Cool. So that's kind of fun. Now, I can do, now that I have these, again, a lot of this is just sort of like once you have things, now it's just a matter of like, I can move things around quickly. So I can just duplicate this and now we can go into the flute line. And we've already got the orchestra here for it. So I might start, like, I'm starting to hear like a trumpet kind of coming in at the end and doing something like that. So that's probably where I would start taking this. I'm also noticing that, I hope so. I'm also noticing that the flute line is by itself is pretty empty. So I'm going to put it into an oboe because those pair really nicely together. And I'm an oboe player, so. There. I can definitely do space ballads. There's a guy who does, I did theme music for his Twitch stream, and he streams a lot of Elite Dangerous and stuff like that. So, yeah, basically, yeah, space oboe. Now, I don't have a lot of time left, and I want to make sure there's room for questions, but oh, I forgot to duplicate the bass. Also, happy accidents are your friend. So much of what happens is happy accidents, and then you lean into them instead of shy away from them. So I forgot to copy the bass line over. Do I have some Unreal Tournaments 1 style chiptunes? I wish I did. I haven't been doing a lot of chiptune stuff, but the project I am working on right now has a digitally feel. So as I develop more of that, I'll get some more of that out there. So again, I didn't copy the bass line over when we went over to the woodwinds taking the lead, but maybe I want the bass, maybe I want it to drop out to give it a lighter feel. So let's hear how it sounds with the bass. Without the bass? I kind of like it without. It's subtle, but it lets those woodwinds just kind of... So without the bass playing, it lets the woodwinds just kind of float. Okay, maybe I want to do something because this will be fun. Just a big crescendo at the end because it'll be fun, right? Because we have to go into something like super epic. Maybe we're going to go into a battle scene. So one thing I like to do is, again, being able to cut and paste and move things around quickly, I can hit record. I can hit record, not on the string ensemble, please. Thank you. So I'm going to just play a percussion part with the click on. Come on, where's my click? There it is. So maybe something like that, right? And we'll get that lined up nicely. I don't know if that... We'll see how well I played in time. Because epic percussion is always nice. It's kind of fun. It's not in time, but it's kind of fun. Let's move everything down so we are in time. I don't know. Again, this is just me hacking something in. I would actually do a much better job if I wasn't on a time limit. But maybe this is where we go. So yeah, maybe then like I do some weird chords like maybe in Code Menu. Oh my God, it does not have it. That's right. So maybe over that I would do something like. Okay, so anyway, this is I'll get to that question because I'll just wrap up here. So basically, when again, this stuff all applies to other things like synths and I don't know, basically anything. The same stuff can be applied to chip tunes, can be applied to 8-bit sounding things, which I guess is chip tunes, more synthy style stuff. I like to do layers with sort of weird synthy hybrid instruments because it can make things sound really epic. One of my latest things I love doing is running harp, like orchestral harp through guitar amps. It goes pretty wild. But again, these are all different things, and having these tools at our disposal allows us to work very quickly with you. And after we clean this all up, you can get very, very high quality sounding things. Another thing I like to do to even make it like, for example, I play oboe. I actually play a real oboe. So I would go back in after I was done composing everything, getting that kind of bought off. I'd go back in and actually record a real oboe line because that'll give it that human touch that makes everything else kind of start to fall into place and sound more real. And of course, like I said, if you have a big budget, you can take it all the way to recording full-on orchestras. But, I might bring in an actual horn player if it's an important part, things like that. So yeah, we can start asking questions in the channel. This is basically what I wanted to touch on. Do I use any other MIDI instruments for composing or just keyboards? Right now, it's mostly keyboards. This one's really programmable, so I have it set up in very specific ways, which is really, really nice. I have this. I also have a full 88 key weighted key piano keyboard behind me. Behind here, I actually have like one of the grid. Let me grab it. I got this guy. It's a grid controller, and I sometimes use this. Mostly I use this for performing, but I really like they're really cool for different things. And sometimes for like drums and stuff, I'll use these. Yeah. I have a lot of toys. Yeah, any other questions? If not, I'm going to Skype you guys a link to one of my latest songs that I'll actually talk about because I think it's kind of a fun example of what you can do with virtual instruments. So if that's okay with you guys, and you guys can come back from the land of Muteland if you like.
Sounds good. It might mess up cameras for the stream, but I mean we're all wrapping up and it should be fine.
I can throw it into chat from there.
Yeah,
so.
I'm actually already there too, so. Yeah, she just asked that. She just answered that.
I think I haven't used Reactable. Sequencers are cool. I mean, essentially Cubase is a big sequencer. Anything, how do I want to say it? Anything that gets you to the result you want quickly is worthwhile. Sequencers are really fun for doing cool arpeggio things or really interesting, intricate lines. Yeah, like I said, I haven't used Reactable at all, but like I have a modular synthesizer that has a really cool sequencer on it, and I love the kind of being able to just like mess with things and see what happens. When you were researching into composing, you saw some rhythm that was done with chord change, chord fiend on the first beat of the CEG for notes. But what about additional like lead? How is that achieved? Oh gosh, that is a big subject. Yeah. One good thing is I actually do live composition every weekend at twitch.tv/lizardeatsflies, and I get into a lot of this stuff. I basically work on soundtrack music live in front of people and answer questions. So, yeah, how you do harmonies and when you change them and how you do the leads, for me, a lot of it is just a feel thing. Listen to a lot of music. And one thing I really, really like, listen to music you like that has interesting leads or interesting chord changes, and take note of where on the beat they change. What rhythms do they use? Even like write them down or try to recreate them. It's a really cool way of learning a lot. Strip down other songs you like. Rackbills. But it's always said me, you know what? Yeah, the idea of making music without effort, push a button and it's music. To me, I used to be one of those people, and I kind of think it's a bit of a Luddite thing because, to be honest, computers are powerful. We use them for so many different things. Just because I can make a Photoshop brush or use a paint bucket to fill the background all one color, does that mean I should have taken out the brush tool and done it? Like, no. Like, if it reduces effort, the big problem that I see with using things is when you come to rely on it and you don't break out and try things. Because if I look at things like, even like with a lot of people who are doing really, really cool, weird experiment, like I think like Pink Floyd and the stuff that they were doing in the studio, and that I can do in cut and paste, and they were like literally cutting and taping tape loop together, and like the ease that I can do stuff digitally can kind of forget how to work it to make it, like, sometimes when you put in the effort you get that artistic thing that's missing. But that being said, especially for like what I'm doing, it's like soundtrack music, and to bring it back to indie games, I have to be able to work quickly. It's just, I have to be able to get good sounding music quickly, and anything that I can do to make that easier to get me to the desired result is good. It's the same argument with Auto-Tune. Again, any tool can be abused, but any tool can be used to make things that much more awesome in the right hands. I am going to paste this link into Skype. This one is, and then we can end it, I guess, because I'm running a little over, sorry. This song that I just linked that hopefully we can play is called Pass Into the Halls. I actually wrote it for a Skyrim mod, and the language being sung is actually ancient Dwemerish, which is an ancient race that mysteriously disappeared. And I found some rough translations and actually programmed in everything you hear. I believe everything you hear is virtual instruments and sampled instruments. And yeah, basically I did that. That would be
awesome. I can do that. I already have it set up. I can totally do that.
Yep. And that'd be awesome. So this is kind of to give you an idea of what a finished piece of mine is like, and how you can do some really cool stuff with virtual instruments. I'll stick around and chat and keep answering questions if people want to talk to me. Thank you guys so much for putting this on. Thank you everybody for being here. You are all awesome. And keep in touch. Find me on Twitter.
Definitely.
Take care. Thank you.